He comes back from the war, he marries the woman he loves, she loves him, they remain happily married. Their children love him. Christopher, of course, does so much in terms of editing and assembling his father's unpublished works afterwards, devotes his life to it. His students love him. And rarest of all things, his colleagues love him. I mean, we're talking about academia here. Where, you know, the capacity for Oxford dons to be bitchy about each other is legendary. They loved him, and he was just an all-round successful man. By the way, let me give you, I think I may have mentioned it once before. I was buying a front-end loader for my tractor, and I was in Oxfordshire to pick it up, and I went to a farm that was called, oh dear, now I'm going to get the man to see now.
Well, just talk past it, you'll remember it.
Anyway, it was a Tolkien name, and I was talking to the man I bought the front-end loader for.
Mirkwood?
Yes, it was Mirkwood. I think, and he said, oh yes, this house was owned by one of Tolkien's fellow academics, and he actually used to come here when he was writing Lord of the Rings. And he said, you see that funny little thing there? And he pointed to an odd little structure. He said, that's one of the two towers.
Whoa.
They built it together in the garden. They built, and then the property was divided, and there was another tower in the other garden. And I think that had been demolished. That was one of the original towers.
Wow. Can I just ask, throw out two titles other than Hobbit, Lord of the Rings, and Silmarillion that are of his that you like?
Can you articulate that favorite that are besides the Silmarillion and Hobbit?
Yeah, besides Hobbit, Silmarillion, and Lord of the Rings, what are two Tolkien works that you like?
Well, Silmarillion's my favorite. Real random, that little book.
Unfinished Tales,
You got me. There you go.
Oh yeah, Farmer's House, yeah. It's funny, the reason I wanted to ask you about it is because I was suddenly feeling guilty that I never really went to his other work and like wanted to pull it down and live in it. It's almost, I don't know why. I mean, it's so brilliant. It's really interesting. Good question.
And then, of course, you know, he's not only a great and recognized scholar of these ancient Nordic languages, he then writes a book that basically creates a whole new genre of fiction. I mean, fantasy as we know it these days is all really derived from Tolkien. I mean, it's one hell of a life achievement.
Yeah.
He's a completely successful man.
What is your name, friend?
My name's Christian. I just want to tell you, Sean, Elijah, John, these are the most magnificent films that have ever been made. I don't think anything else has ever been done with excellent.
This was pretty good.
That's a line.
That's fine. That's all right.
That's my question. And yeah, the last video was horrible. That's my
Last
question.
Jedi was horrible.
You didn't have to say it in the microphone.
Okay, my question is, what is your, out of the 3 films that you made, this is just a general question, what is your favorite memories from the film? Do you guys have any favorite memories you want to share working on the film?
They're innumerable. The thing that comes to mind, the first thing that comes to mind is maybe seeing Hobbits in the first film. In terms of having a transportive experience where you can't see where a set ends and begins, and like the blending of the New Zealand landscape with these hobbit holes and planted trees and vegetation and, a bridge and a river. Like cresting over the farmer's land from having gone from base camp, in our trailers and getting made up to getting into Hobbiton and seeing it was completely natural. Nothing was like, and we had an extraordinary sets, amazing locations, but nothing to take that. I also turned 19. I had my birthday. 19.
19 going on 49. I recall most in Seatoon, the area of Wellington where most of us stayed, the homes are very kitschy. They look like they're in the 50s, 60s, 70s. Yeah, bungalows and kind of cool little things built in. They have earthquakes there and a lot. And so, but at a certain point, I wanted. There was a hill. I think it was called Beacon Hill. No, not Beacon Hill. There's another hill. I can't find it on GPS when I look at it now, because I think so many things have been changed on it. But it was on a cul-de-sac on the tippity top of this mountain, and the winds, windy Wellington, like windy Chicago, right? Windy Wellington, the winds get to hurricane force winds, 70, 80, 90 miles an hour regularly. And we were staying in a very contemporary modern house at the top of it, kind of like, status houses. And I remember Peter dropped me off once. He was like, "Yeah, that's about how I thought you'd live, Sean." And like there was the tile had heating, like coils under the thing, whatever. And in the backyard, which you could look at the open mouth of the sound, where these huge ships would come in and go into the harbor, the Wellington Harbor, and then go out to the Cook Strait, and it was a pageant. Every day was a pageant of all these different massive vessels coming in and out. And in the backyard, tiny little square patch of grass, we had a trampoline that Allie, when she was tiny, really enjoyed. I remember jumping up and down, drunk, on the trampoline in a hurricane gale force wind, and thinking, this is unique. Drunk. I wasn't drunk, but I had a beer. I remember I had a beer.
Oh, yeah, you come from a party.
He had one beer.
Yeah, it's just the smell of beer and the bouncing on the trampoline, the feel of the 80-mile-an-hour wind, the vision of the. It was like, yeah. And then I remember seeing my wife like this.
What you can't understand, except when you're actually there, is how geologically active that whole area is. There is a great game that you Americans have never learned and probably never will, called cricket. There is a great cricket ground in Wellington where some of the finest cricket matches in the world are played. That spot in Captain Cook's map is down as safe, deep anchorage. The ground has risen that much in that big earthquake that they had. The ground at some points rose 60 feet into the air. Those are the geological forces that make Wellington and make New Zealand. There were no mammals in New Zealand before the Maori got there, except two species of bat which were blown in. Why were there no mammals there? Because New Zealand separated from Gondwana land before the evolution of mammals.
That's because they didn't have a Costco. So cricket, for those of you who don't know, is like baseball but paced slower than golf. But we do know a little bit about the topography because we climbed a volcano, an active volcano, to do a bit of filming.
Driving around that area, You can often come to these massive stumps, and sometimes they're not that massive. Sometimes they're only 6 feet, 8 feet wide, and that's the solid basalt core of a volcano that has eroded down beside it. It's extraordinary.
I have a question for you guys. If you had to redo this whole process and you had to pick up the litter of any character, but you had to switch characters, who would you guys take? Like, whose role would you want?
Not Gimli.
You couldn't take the makeup.
I think everyone sees me as Aragorn.
Yeah.
The question actually was really one that Christopher Lee would have leapt to answer. because when it was mooted to make a radio play and then a movie of Lord of the Rings, Tolkien himself wanted Christopher Lee to play Gandalf. And all his life he'd hoped that he would have that opportunity. So I guess I'll answer for dear old Christopher. He would say Gandalf.
I think maybe Theoden would be fun. He's not a burner. Yeah, because now I'm at an age now where I'm starting to look at theater a little bit and wanting to understand your fellow there with the quill, that guy, you know? That guy. Yeah, I'm starting to yearn to commune with language and right
I should tell you that you are talking unquestionably to a United States congressman, at least, senator, probably, and one day my money would be on it, candidate for the Supreme Office. He used to say that, and I would mock him for his verbosity and his shoddy use of the English language. He has since buckled down, really studied administration, got himself into the Screen Actors Guild, and is really working to understand every aspect of it. There is a mastery there that's developing that will one day lead to a political office. And as you know,
You gonna do that?
So I just finished my master's at American University. Administration, public policy, and John, it's just so heartwarming to hear you like understand what I've been trying to do, because I think a lot of I live in my house. They see what I do and they just think I'm insane. They think I'm a crazy person, but I really do want to understand the mechanics of the union and how to help members and you know. And now that public administration, public policy was such great. And once you see how trained experts approach water policy, or in California we deal with fire policy right now, or any of the things that are important to us as Americans, you know, medicine or our health, you know, our elder care, our pensions, whatever you want to call it. The more you realize that the posturing that most of our political leaders do is insane, because it really requires a commitment to attention to detail and experimentation and follow through on things that take more than a 2-year congressional cycle or a 4-year presidential cycle. So I just hope that as the more information we are able to consume happens, that we can start to celebrate like the mid-level public administrator and turn them into our heroes, because they're the ones who are actually trying to solve problems every single day.
This is the 5-minute heads up. Make it public. This will be our final question. As well, we have to hand the room off. That's the rule.
We're getting kicked out, you guys.
I still have like 2 hours worth of questions left, but we should go out to those guys because they've been standing there, and I think somebody over there needs to get the question.
Welcome. What is your name?
Lupe Arianes, you must know New Mexicans love you. Thank you so much. So my question is, when was your oh shit, this is gonna outlive me moment?
When I saw Peter Jackson answering every question that his crew could pose to him, watching with an absolute mastery of getting performances out of his actors, when I saw the effort that was going in, I realized that I'd been completely wrong and that this was going to be one of the great ones of all time. And I remember I made a fool of myself at that press conference when I said, this movie is going to be bigger than the new Star Wars. Peter Jackson went,
Yeah, but the world media was like, maybe. You want to go? Oh, you go last. But I've been blessed in my career to have that a couple of times. When you get cast as
Are you going to the game?
yeah, Notre Dame is going to beat Ohio, and remember you heard it here first. But when you get cast in the Steven Spielberg movie when you're 12, you're like, okay, this is, and it's got a big pirate ship set that people are coming from all over the world to look at on the. It was definitely something like, oh, this is a part of film history now. Even though it's pop culture and whatever, you could feel that it had a kind of indelibility. But I was in Whiting, Illinois, shooting the steel mining sequences for Rudy. And I remember looking up at this incredible rolling mill where there's hot molten lava that was in these cauldrons would get poured out, and they were making rebar at that point. And the heat, the steam, the danger, the size of it, the antiquity, it was like, this is industrial age, technology that is certainly going to give everyone around here cancer, but it was just I knew that I had found myself into a really important American story where class was being engaged in a way that it hadn't been for a little while, with other, great playwrights and, artists and people understand that class and class mobility is really kind of important in telling the human story. And all of a sudden I was like, oh my God, this is gonna last. This is gonna be like an important thing because it honors the sweep of that journey. So that was the first time. And then with Lord of the Rings, I think it was when those scripts were put on the table.
I think that's such an interesting question, like when you realize that something is going to go beyond you, is bigger than you, and it's going to be sort of embraced into pop culture. I don't think that happened for me with Lord of the Rings for a couple of years into the release cycle. I just think, you're too in it to have any perspective on it. It was for me anyway. There was a thing where it was happening and it was exploding and it was huge, and that was sort of shocking, I think, for all of us who had been sequestered in this small country, New Zealand, making these walking movies in private. This is what it felt like. And then suddenly it was, out into the world, and they were huge. But it wasn't until the sort of cycle of that was over, because we were so in it, and like our brains were going back to New Zealand next year for pickups on Two Towers, and we're going to go back for Return of the King, and we're kind of in the midst of this thing still. And it's sort of not until we started sort of meeting y'all, you would tell us your personal stories about how every single year you watch them with your families, and the sense of this sort of ripple effect of these films reverberating into other people's lives year and year and year and year, to now we're 20 years later and we're still hearing new stories and meeting young people who are being introduced to movies for the first time. It's then that you realize, oh, this is so much larger than our experience. We're a tiny part to play in something so huge.
You remind me of something I just want to add on, which is, to me, that, oh shit, this is real feeling that you're describing, to me, is connected to something's important. I mean, people do bad things, and they're known for all time for the bad thing that they did. When 9/11 happened, the fellowship was scheduled to come out like 2 months later, and I remember going to New York to the Palace Theater where we had the premiere. I can't remember the Ziegfeld or one of the Ziegfeld. So before the night before the premiere screening, I went down to Ground Zero, and a couple of the guards let me kind of come in and get next to. It was a mountain. It was a mountain of crushed steel, and it was still on fire months later. Yeah. And I remember looking at it and thinking, connecting the loss of innocence that the Western world was kind of rediscovering, and the themes of Lord of the Rings and the nature of good and evil. And all of a sudden, it felt like God had done this plan where we spent years and years making these movies, and they were going to be made ready just in time to help the world process the scale of evil that had
Thank you so very much to everyone in attendance. Ladies and gentlemen, the Lord of the Rings.